Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the discovery session number 10. This is our 10th one, so it's a milestone. Yoo-hoo. Today, I think what we'll talk about is a little bit of a pickup from session number 8, which was where Marco, you were taking us through essentially how you got the ambition to start your own business from when you were in high school. And session number 8, which is up on the website, people can listen to it. You took us through really kind of what you were thinking, what you were learning, what you were feeling, and all around the age of 17, 18 years old when you created your business, Waiters in Distress.
Yes.
Which people can go listen to that because we're going to pick up on that because that was your first business you started.
Yeah.
We're going to get into kind of how that evolved into other businesses. Before we do that, just to level set folks, this is your core team. If you're joining for the first time, these are the coaches, and all of us collectively together bring this program. I'm going to skip all this. I wanted to get to this. This is what we're going to be covering essentially starting this Friday, May 1st, really starting next week. We're going to get into kind of a more formal focus on these different areas. And that will be our plan. This was discussed, I think, in discovery session number 6 in terms of what we would cover. If anyone wants to kind of understand the rhyme and the reason of what we're focused on and how. How you guys doing, coaches?
Pretty good. Doing good. Keep myself busy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you, what are your thoughts, just real quick tangent, like what are your thoughts on like the quarantine? Is it getting to you, like it's getting a little bit to be too much, or is it actually, are you settling into it, getting used to it, or what?
I mean, I've always kind of worked from home or from my dorm room, whatever the case is. So for me, it's like I've seen an increase in productivity. And luckily I still, like, there's a running park nearby, so I definitely kind of go break a sweat and come back and kind of continue to work. And so I think I'm happy to be busy.
Yeah. It'd be tough if you didn't have a lot to do right now, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that it's nice that you can run your business from home, right? That you can actually do that to the point where being confined to your home almost has made you more productive. I feel the same on my end. For my work, I would travel every week somewhere in the country or somewhere in the world, sometimes a couple cities or a couple countries all in one week. And that was kind of the norm. That was the norm business cycle. It was almost cultural. It was good to be there in person. Not in every case, but I mean, I've had some ridiculous scenarios where I would fly to like London for a 2-hour meeting and come back to California. I mean, it's a pretty unproductive travel if you think about it.
Yeah.
But it was kind of some unwritten rules. There was a little bit of respect that you go in person. It shows you're committed. If your competitor was doing it, you wanted to do it, type of thing as well. It also was, technology was not as conducive at all versus being there in person. You lost a lot. I mean, now with Zoom, it's so collaborative that you can actually almost get more done in some situations, especially as a group. And you can get it done starting at 8 in the morning versus headed to the airport, taking a flight, getting there, driving, et cetera. So I've noticed the same thing, that productivity is actually increasing in certain professions. Alrighty, so let's, Marco, just as let's start off with kind of where we left off, which was you had the business Waiters in Distress in high school. When you left, when and why did you decide to have someone else run that business and you moved on? Was it just lifestyle and you moved to go to college, or what?
No, actually, I mean, I was actually still managing Waiters in Distress from the East Coast. And so I tried that for like a few months, I think half of my freshman year. And so that was like really really full on remote work, a lot of fun, learned a lot, especially as I was the one booking clients and then just passing down the information. But I think to me, I realized, and then I also got a lot of feedback from, the team who was, the management team at Waiters and Stress, that we weren't as interested in the event staffing service as much, and we were really kind of, I would call it a pivoting into like photo and video, as like we really saw that like this is what we saw as not only potential service to build a career off of, but also an area of interest that really compelled us and gave us a new sense of drive. Again, similar to the dog walking, where things became routine.
Yeah.
So did, there's only so many staffing events you can do, when after a while it just seemed they all seem kind of like the same, right? And obviously there's like little differences in like with logistics, but overall, like, it's delivering the same service. And so I think we were pursuing like a more dynamic and interactive experience. And no, I was like, okay, like I want to be challenged again. And I want to try something new and learn some new skills. And so the conversation was really like about, I think we had like a capacity conversation. And I don't know, and Chris, if you like, you can jump in on this, but we kind of played around with the idea.
Where was Christian? Where were you at this time? Like, what was your role? And
Well, before we even like left to college, we were kind of in that point where we're like, what should we do with this?
Mhm.
And I completely like, I couldn't do it anymore because I was going to work on campus.
Mhm.
So, and I was going to be very busy. So I told them that, I can't really do this anymore.
Yeah. And
But
you left, right? You left to, yeah, LA.
But before we even left, we kind of had booked a few events for photo and video, like for the year of like 2019. And I remember we came back over here. That's when I decided like not to be at that school anymore. We came back over here, and we had those events, and that's where she came in. And then she was helping me with like photo and video because Marco used to help me with it, but then she started helping me with it.
when you say photo? So the backdrop on this is you were doing Waiters in Distress, where you would go do catering services for birthdays or for weddings or for graduations in South Central LA in your community there.
Yeah, all over LA County, actually. But yeah.
Really, all over LA County, great. So, and it was funny because you would take Ubers to get there because you weren't even old enough to drive, and you would just bake that into your fee to the customer.
Mhm.
But then you started to upsell the customer based on premium services you could offer. Like, hey, when we come cater your birthday party with the cleanup and the chairs and tables and the food, we can also take photos for you and post them on social media and do other things like that. And you're saying that was more fun and interesting to you and more creative. So you started to pivot and say, maybe we could just do that as a full-time thing. That was the birth of your next idea.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's exactly how it went. And she started helping me with like the capturing the event and editing, and then that's how she kind of transitioned into like the whole Fifths and Pictures, because on Waiters in Distress, before we kind of abandoned it, he was our graphic designer in there as well. So that's when we started towards the end, and then that's when we all came up with the idea of like we could prioritize photo and video and use it as like a marketing service rather than just let's record one day and that's it.
Noella, you were the mastermind behind the creative side that made them realize, man, we could do this for a living. That's usually how it works. You got the mastermind kind of in the background, and all of a sudden, boom. Noella, when you say you were the graphic designer, I know what that is, but why don't you explain kind of what that role is? What is graphic design?
Well, I think mainly it started when they decided to do the graduation for Nava, right? It was the graduation for Nava. They wanted to make their own, what is it called? The order form for, how Fordorama has their order forms to like order like packages.
Yeah.
Order form, and I saw him doing. I was hanging out with him, and he was trying to do it like on Photoshop, and like I was seeing him kind of struggle, and I have a background in photo, like a long background in Photoshop because I took a digital imaging class at Nava with Mr. Watstein.
Cool. Yeah.
So I kind of took the computer from him and I started doing it by myself. And he sent it to Marco, and then he told him like, oh, it was her that did it. And so I kind of just continued to work on Photoshop for them.
Yeah, you had a creative side to you that knew kind of how to position and orient images in a way that made it good marketing materials.
Yeah, I remember I even tried to make I think I tried to make an order form, and it was not as pretty as what you had.
And so in Photoshop, for those that don't know, is a software that lets you take basically build out anything. See, that's another interesting thing because, I would say not 10 years ago, but 20 years ago, that was actually very expensive software.
Mm-hmm.
I remember like at one point I used to use Photoshop, and I remember it was like $900 to buy the software, and it was very complicated to use. And it was before it became so user friendly. And basically now there's software like that that's free. I mean, did you have to pay for Photoshop? Usually has a license, but was the version you're using, did you even have to really pay for it, or was it just a nominal fee, or what?
So you have like two options. You could pay for it like as a yearly subscription or a monthly subscription. At the time when Y came back, I wasn't working, so I had to do the monthly subscription.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like $20 a month. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there's software out there you can probably use it's called freeware, which is software that's free. And sometimes it's built by a company that's just not trying to make money. Sometimes you have to watch some advertisements while you're using the software, so you can even do it for free. And it might not have all the bells and whistles that Photoshop has, but it still has quite a bit in it.
And there's even like free like forms of Photoshop on your mobile device that you can use that you don't have to pay for.
Yeah. All right, so you guys started to realize, man, there might be an idea here that more is aligned with our passion. That's really important, by the way, right? You guys saw that firsthand, Marco, like you said, when you were doing the dog walking business, then when you're doing the waiters in distress business, you gotta love what you do. Otherwise, it can get very monotonous. And why not? Why not pivot into something, especially when you're younger? Well, I guess at any age, but why not pivot and start off on things that you're actually excited about? Because that's going to keep you motivated.
Yeah, I think we also faced a point where like I think the summer with like when we had the biggest team, it was like a 15 part-time staff, and so we were just sending like waiters all over the place, and waiters and photographers and videographers. We travel as well, but then like we realized that like in terms of like I think we looked at like numbers, and we were like, oh wow, like this is great, but we have to do so many, we have to do this so many times to like get a reasonable amount of like profit and like purchase more equipment, and it just wasn't making sense to us.
Yeah.
And so that kind of as much as we entered the business to like support families who are sort of tired with like the whole event planning and events executing the whole event. We realized that like I think it was time to transition to like working with more more like clients who have like bigger needs and bigger budgets.
Yeah.
So like organizations, nonprofits, kind of was where we ended up moving towards.
Yeah. So like when you say basically what you did was you had a business and you're running that business. Your goal was to serve the community, but also you guys had to sustain a living. You had bills to pay. You had things you wanted to save up for, and you basically prepared a budget, which was like a pro forma profit and loss statement, right? Which was basically, I imagine, Marco, you sat down with the team and said, look, you could use a tool like Microsoft Excel.
Yeah, we use Google Sheets.
Yeah, you can use Google Sheets for free. Where basically it's simple software, but you basically go in and you make, it's called scenario planning. It was one of the things on the list. If you look at the agenda that I just flashed up at the beginning of this call, it's called scenario planning. And that's actually, there's a whole discipline around scenario planning. And that's a lot of consulting firms like mine actually do scenario planning for businesses, where we run multiple scenarios to help them prepare for the future and try to share with them what is the optimal scenario they should pursue. And that sounds like what you did. You did your own version of scenario planning, where you said, we've got, in order to make money that's acceptable level for us to make this worth our while and sustain our pay our bills, et cetera, whatever our goal is, we need to do 15 events, and these events are going to require 4 people each. and 4 people each is going to cost this much. And then if you add on the Uber charge for getting to and from, and then you add on the equipment, if you get really sophisticated, you actually say, well, we buy the equipment up front, but we depreciate it. So we allocate it out each time to show that eventually we'll need new equipment when the equipment gets older. Can you describe a little bit about, I mean, it's not rocket science, of course, but it's an important practice that you did. It's good that you just thought that way. Some people, you'd be surprised, some people, like I'm sure that are listening to this, if they didn't hear someone describe it to them, they wouldn't really know that that's something they have to think and plan for. But once they realize it, it's not that hard to do, right? So can you describe, you and Christian, Noella, what did that process look like? Like, how did you basically prepare your scenario plans?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think we used Google Sheets a lot, and we had you know, general meetings together, and we would talk about sort of I think we focused the conversation on services, right? And so we looked at like what is like the spectrum of possibilities based on each service. So like, what if we like only offered waiters? What if we dropped photo and video and just specialized in waiters? What if we only did photography? What if we only did videography? And then we made it even more complex by saying, what if we only worked with one certain kind of client, like schools or wedding venues? And you know, with each single scenario or each single kind of factor, you realize that, like, you know, they kind of come attached to like a longer list of you know, like kind of requirements and needs and you know, kind of changes that may need to be made. And so we kind of looked at, okay, so like what resources do we have now? We have, you know, we already have the photo and video equipment. We have an enormous amount of skills and content that we didn't have when we first started our, you know, our first business. Like we have actual, like, you know, content that, you know, we have work to show other, you know, potential clients. And I think that was really what helped us. Well, we felt more comfortable, like, oh, what if we venture into something bigger? Because we have, like, you know, we have something to show.
Well, the other thing that's interesting about that, and it's something that you have to really think in advance about, is how do I create a scalable business versus a business that can't scale very easily? And businesses that can scale are usually digital businesses, because you can duplicate digital and there's no cost to duplicate digital typically. For you to duplicate something that's physical, there's usually a lot of cost to duplicate it physically. So when you start off a business, you might say, well, both businesses seem like good ideas. And by the way, if you pitch an idea to a venture capitalist or to an investor or to someone, an angel investor like we've been discussing, they're in their mind, they're thinking, can this scale? Can it scale exponentially? Can it, not linear, but can it scale exponentially? Can we expect it to double over the years, like every year to double in its ability? Or is that just not feasible because it will get too large, it'll get too complicated because it's too dependent on physical? A good example would be when you had a waiters in distress business, the only way that you could make profit and income is by hiring more waiters, because that's basically what people were paying for, which meant more people. And that was not a skill set everyone could do. It's not something you could just hire people and put them on the job. You had to train them a little bit. And you probably have a lot of turnover too, like, which means you have to retrain people because they would do it for a few months and say, I'm going to go do something else. And so the business is hard to scale. It's hard to make it bigger over time without just having tremendous costs and complexity for it to scale. So you have to think about a business through that lens and compare that to a business that can be almost the exact same model, but everything's now digital. It almost sounds like that what you did, because when you create one digital image of a form or a logo or some content, you can change it up a little bit, but you can reuse it again and again and again. It's digital. So now you're selling digital content as part of a marketing service business versus physical. So now the price you get in terms of revenue is not a price per unit of a person. It's a price which is hard to duplicate and scale. It's the price per unit of some digital content, which you could create once and use 100 times. And so an investor will tell you that's a lot better model because it has a lot better longer term potential, right? And if I was going to invest in one model versus the other, not that it's not admirable to do the waiters in distress and that you could grow a great big business out of that. I mean, it could be a huge business one day. I'm just saying from an investor standpoint, I might look at that and say, both of them are good ideas. I just like this one better because of the reason it can scale. I mean, if it really works and you guys are really good, you got to hire a lot more people on the waiters in distress with the model. But if it's going well and you're really good on the digital side, you just have to copy and paste more, you know what I mean, so to speak. It's a digital business. You can scale it. You still need people, but it's not like that's not the price per unit. The price per unit is not based on a person's time. It's based on a deliverable that's usually digital, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that business, quick question, did you incorporate these businesses? Did you just report them at the end of the year as like, how formal did you make it? I mean, sometimes I've had businesses where I didn't make it into I didn't incorporate it. I just, at the end of the year, if I made enough money from it, I would just declare it as an independent on my taxes. But I'm just kind of curious, did you put a business structure model around it?
No, actually, we did the last one where we made it like our own independent income. It's, you know, it was just kind of like organized by us, and that's what's cool also. But like, you know, as far as like exiting, when it came down to like exit, like, you know, obviously we had this really cool operation going on, but like, you know, we didn't have to deal with the hassle of like, you know, letting the city know and then letting, you know, all kinds of factors, you know, shutting down things. And so it was good too.
Because I don't want people to get discouraged thinking, oh my gosh, if I launch a business, I have to create a company. I don't know the first thing about that. First of all, it's really easy to create a company. You can do it online. It's not a complicated thing. It costs money to create a company. The government will want, but that's usually if you're going to usually create the company. You don't have to do that for tax reasons because you can report your income as an independent, just like you normally would. But usually it's for legal reasons if you just don't want to get sued and you would like you'd like a company getting sued instead of you personally getting sued. So a lot of times people will do that to protect themselves. So you're not liable as an individual. So you might create an S corp or a limited liability partnership or a C corporation for some of those reasons, you know, which is just a matter of, you know, you want to talk to someone in taxes to give you advice on that, but it's not like, you know, I've had a lot of businesses where I didn't do anything as far as create any type of corporation. I just worked, I made money at the end of the year. When I did my taxes, there's a place that you can put down if you made any income off of any services as an independent person, right? So that helps so people know that that's not a complicated thing. Do any of you recall at a time when you thought like, yeah, it's kind of scares me. I've got to create some company. Do we have to create a company? I don't know how to do that. And then you realized, wait, it's not that complicated.
Pablo.
Oh, Pablo.
Yeah, because like I said last time about how like that scares me. There's some stuff about like federal buildings. I don't know. It's like I feel guilty walking inside of them. So like we went to like Norwalk to like register ourselves as partners and as a business. Even though I was there with a purpose, just walking to like the whole like building, I felt like I don't know, paranoid. And also when I like reading all the terms, part of it was, you know, now you're liable to be sued. I'm like, I could get sued? Hold on, I'm just 17. So yeah.
Well, Americans like to sue each other, so you always got to worry. I mean, unfortunately, you got to worry about that because Americans is just like a lawsuit nation. Some countries aren't that trigger happy on the lawsuits.
Yeah.
You know, it's I don't know. You realize that as you get more successful, you have to protect yourself like that because some people think about, you know, there's always someone that's out there to take advantage of the system. But
I think Fifths and Pictures was a lot of fun with like, the whole startup thing because that was like, you know, now we wanted to make this something more, you know, make this a legal entity. And so like I remember, you know, I actually, and this maybe I'll talk about this later, but I helped my dad start his own business. And so that was really my first time kind of going through the whole like legal route. And so like, you know, I just did the research. I looked up, okay, what do we need to do? And then we went together to kind of, you know, we went to Norwalk, the county clerk's office, we filed, got the, you know, federal tax identification number, filed with the city. And so, you know, you just kind of learn like what you need to do. And there's guidance on like the city website and the Small Business Administration. By the way, the Small Business Administration has like all these like they have online educational videos that walk you through like the more technical aspects of starting, running, and, you know, scaling a business, which is pretty interesting. All free too. You just log in and click on videos you like. but yeah, like I remember that was fun, and Pablo, being the youngest, he's a little always like kind of hesitant at times when we're like, oh, like like, are we really doing this? But like, and uh
Just the swing part. Yeah,
yeah, and I think what was interesting is and I can't maybe I'll show you pictures next time, but like just like we just like I remember like when we went to the LA to Norwalk, the LA County Clerk's office, and then they we showed we have to show the IDs and the woman, she was like, oh, you guys are really young, and so like that was an interesting, remember that, Chris, Nalia? And she was like, oh, okay. And then after that, we went to Target. There was like a nearby, we didn't want to wait to go home to get our federal identification number. And Chris, or Noelle, do you want to say this? What we did, like at Target?
Went there for the Wi-Fi, didn't we?
Yeah. We went there for the Wi-Fi. We're like, oh, let's just get our tax ID. Let's just go to Target. Target there's a Bank of America nearby. We could do or get our business account started there. And so we went to Target for the free Wi-Fi. We jumped up, we opened our laptop, we put in our like our social securities and things like that. IRS returned with us a federal tax identification number, and boom, like now we could open a bank account. And we just went to the county clerks to get a fictitious business name, and so now Fifths and Pictures is like it's a legal entity.
Yeah.
And now we had like the two components needed to open a bank account. And so we just like literally drove from Target, like very 2 minutes to Bank of America. And then again, we got the same face where like, the I guess the sales rep, she was really nice, and she was like, oh, you guys are young too.
Yeah, that's cool. That's actually a compliment. They probably were impressed,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is what I tell people listening, like, the good news is you only do it once and then you're done forever. So that's a good news. So even if you can't do it in an afternoon and it takes a couple of days, working with the city government and the state government is always kind of slow. It's always a little more complicated than it needs to be. They're not the most advanced with using technology. They're getting better though. But I guess the point is, if you can do it. I mean, you can get it done. You might have a little setback here and there, and it might be a little confusing, but as a matter of fact, that's probably the most complicated part of running a business, is just to do that stuff, because everything else is so easy, but working with the government to set all that stuff up. But it is something that could just take an afternoon, and like you guys did it without any knowledge before you were able to do it. So, I just don't want people to be scared away thinking, what did you create, an S Corp or a C Corp or a LLP or what?
A general partnership.
Oh, general partnership, okay. Yeah, so, you can have, there's different models that you can create, and usually someone will advise you or you watch the videos online, they'll tell you kind of what type of model you should create. But I like the fact that, there's a couple of, why did you create the business? Was it for the legal purposes in case you get sued? Was it because you really wanted to, it wasn't a hobby, you really wanted to grow this into a real business, so you wanted to start off on the right foot? You already had enough proof to say this could be a business, so you wanted to create a real company?
Yeah, like, well, we knew that we needed, like, because we want to work with like school districts, with like the city and other, clients who are going to demand that we have everything set up well.
Yeah.
So that was like the big part. And then the second part is like, at least, for general partnership, we like the idea of tax obligations just passing down into our individual tax forms. And we thought that was a very simple, simple way of doing things.
Yeah, when you create a business too, you can you can do this independently, but it's easier in a business to write off all your expenses.
Mm-hmm.
So anything you use for your business, if you use part of your house for your business, you can actually, the IRS lets you declare a certain square footage of your apartment or your house, in terms of your rent. You get to write it off. What that means when we say write it off in your taxes, it means if I have to pay $1,000 a month for an apartment and I use 25% of it for my office only, then I don't know if it's exactly like this, but I don't know if it's 1 for 1, but basically in this example, 25% of that, $250, I get to declare as tax deductible. So that way, when I do pay my taxes at the end of the year for any money I made, and the government says, well, you gotta give us you have to give us some tax on that, I can say, well, first deduct all these expenses that I had as business, take that off the top, So you're only taxing on what's left over. So it's tax deductible. It's essentially savings. And that can be the car, if you have a car that you use for work. It can be the clothing, if it's like a uniform, even if the uniform is a t-shirt and jeans, but that's what you want everyone to wear. Any paper you buy, or any ink that you buy for your printer, a laptop that you buy, all that gets to be business write-offs. So there are advantages to creating the business. And then you brought up a good point, Marco, is you're right. Some companies or some entities, like if you're trying to do something for the school district, they're not going to work with you unless you have a tax ID and a business, you have a business license registered with the city, right? So congrats. So that's awesome. You did all that. How old were you when you guys all did that?
19, yes. Yeah, like summer 2019.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and it definitely was comforting, like the idea that, like, because I remember, like and we've encountered this in past, like you want to work with certain people, and then they kind of throw all these like legal loophole, like barriers or kind of obstacles, like, oh, you need to submit this and that. And now, like, we get that these days, and we respond right back with all the documents, and we're good. And like even like one of our a few months ago we decided to get general business liability insurance, and so that really kind of gave us the edge. That was like, okay, now like we're like we have it all. Like what else do you want from us, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like I used to think doing things in business was really complicated, but things have gotten so user friendly. Not just the area we were just talking about, but just in general. And so I don't know if it's a fair analogy, Marco, but what I like to tell people is, we discussed, I think, this before, but, take something that young people are really good at because they use it so much. So they're super intuitive, like Instagram. I mean, a lot of young people are basically professionals on Instagram, meaning they know every single feature. They don't have to guess about what to do and how to do it. If they want to create something, it's easy to create because they've done it so many times. A good mindset to have when you think about, like, oh, if I'm creating a business and I have to incorporate my business with the city, or if I have to use Photoshop software to make a flyer or something, that probably is no more real complicated than what it took you to learn Instagram. It's not, don't be nervous based on the fact that you just don't know, and don't think that you needed some prior education to do it. You picked up Instagram just by trial and error, by failing a little bit, and then eventually you figured it out. And so I think a lot of things, unlike it used to be you have to have you used to have to be a specialized accountant or use an accountant to do your taxes. Now you can use TurboTax, right? There's software that walks you through it. And I think things like that will become easier and easier. And I think creativity and even things like social sciences, like Noella, like psychology, some of those things are actually going to start to become a little bit more important, because AI can't really, at least now, that's going to be much harder to duplicate. The analytical things are what AI is going to be able to do. Just like a calculator could figure out how to do math a lot better than humans, and therefore you didn't need you didn't need that resource, right? So this business, the new business you had, describe it. One of you describe it a little bit more as far as what was the market demand that you saw, and what's the whole service model around it?
Anybody want to?
Pablo, you're part of that team, aren't you?
Yeah, I just did a little business and stuff. But yeah, so speaking about Fifth Sons?
Yes.
Yeah, pitch me on it's called Fifth Street.
Fifth Son Pictures.
Yeah, Fifth Son Pictures. Well, actually, like how we are right now, it took many meetings because we originally had plans of just being like like a video company, right? Productions. But then Marcos came out of the blue and started offering like, hey guys, what if we do consulting work, and what if we do stuff like this? And me being me and how you're talking, I'm like, hold on, take a seat, cause like Marcos is a dreamer. Marcos he sees far into the future, and when he says consulting, how he explains it is, we're gonna come in here and revamp the whole company. I'm still in my head, picturing, hey guys, what if it goes bad? That's lawsuits. I'm sure getting sued. I don't know.
He's our guardian on the team, by the way.
He's a guardian. Yeah, right.
more the realist. But
You guys,
yeah,
it sounds like you guys have good business chemistry. So for those listening, we'll at one session we'll talk about business chemistry. This is something the firm I used to work at, Deloitte, had come up with, and it's online for free. But it's basically just the fact that in any good team, you need someone who's a guardian, which means they're kind of risk adverse. They're kind of making sure that we don't get sued, we don't go under, we don't try to go too fast and then screw things up. That's like the guardian. That sounds like you, Pablo. Then you got a person who is the pioneer, which is kind of the dreamer, kind of the big picture thinker and the visionary. Sounds like Marco, you got a little bit of that. And then you have an integrator, which is someone who likes to get everyone working collectively together. It's the personality in the room that likes to see people getting along and get everybody's opinion and make sure that everyone is able to contribute so everyone moves forward together. And then you have a driver, which is the fourth personality, which is someone who's just super determined. Like you know these people, right? Like a driver, just someone, a leader, a driver. Sometimes they conflict with the integrator because they don't like consensus. They just want to drive things. But the point is all four of them are needed to be healthy in the business. You need all four. Because imagine a business with just all drivers or just all dreamers or just all pioneers or just all guardians, right? Or just all integrators. Who has the integrator personality out of the team? And you can have a little bit, when I do this profile, I'm primarily pioneer and driver. So you can have a little bit of both. How did you guys come out as far as your profiles?
I'm a pioneer driver.
Yeah, would make sense.
I think I remember Chris was an integrator. I don't think he remembers, but I remember because a long time ago when we went camping with Exponential Entrepreneur, we did the testing.
Yeah, because you take this, we'll do it one time on one of our programs, because you take a questionnaire and there's no right or wrong answer. It's just ask you like 100 questions or 50 questions. And it's just trying to get your personality based on how you answer it. And by the way, Christian, integrators are the precious gems because they're rare. They're rare. Like, especially in the environment I'm in, which is business and consulting environment, you get mostly drivers and pioneers. Occasionally you get a guardian, like the chief financial officer, someone who's responsible for the finances and stuff. You get a guardian who's a little bit more risk adverse. It's usually really hard to find integrators, people that fill out that survey. I'll give you an example like of a question that would point you, just so people understand what we're talking about. There might be a question in the survey when it's trying to figure out which personality type you are. And the question might read something like, when I'm in a meeting, I like to pick an option. And one option might be, I like to wait and hear what everyone else has to say, and then I give my opinion. Another option might be, I usually have an idea that pops in my head, and I like to share that so everyone hears it, so I'm usually one of the first people to speak, being very assertive. Another option might say, I kind of look at other people's ideas and think about, I usually find myself trying to figure out what's good or bad about their ideas. That's the guardian. So you see how, depending how you answer that question, you're either going to be a driver, pioneer, guardian, integrator. If you answer that question saying, I typically like to hear what everyone else says first before I share my opinion, that's a very subtle question, but that's basically just showing that you like to hear other people's opinion before you make an opinion, which is a trait of an integrator. And so, again, no right or wrong answers. It just means that if you ever have a company or you're hiring people, it's good to see where they are, because you don't want to get too lopsided with having too many of one personality.
Yeah.
You got to make sure you have,
Yeah, so I feel like I definitely know, like, Pablo has to be a guardian, like 100. Yeah, and then Chris, an integrator, and that has changed. And Norley, have you done business chemistry in the past? Maybe, I feel like integrator, guardian. Yeah, I don't know. Well, we can do it.
What do you think Kevin is? Let me see. I think Kevin probably would be like 70% pioneer, 30% driver.
Yeah. I think so.
I mean, it's interesting, right? It really helps. And the other thing about this is you usually have conflict with the person that's opposite of you. So a driver is very opposite of an integrator, and a pioneer is very opposite of a guardian, right? A guardian who's real risk adverse is usually the opposite of a pioneer who's just pie in the sky. So, or just a visionary, right? So it helps to know why that person thinks that way. So you realize you're not disagreeing with each other. You're just wired differently. And it's helpful that you're wired differently. It's not, it gets rid of internal conflict when you can appreciate people's differences and realize it actually helps. Oh, I just thought you don't like any of my ideas. I didn't realize you're actually a guardian. That's just how you're wired. And I appreciate you, the fact that you're a guardian, because if it wasn't for you, I'd be unchained. I'd be off spending all our money on all these wild ideas, right?
That's crazy. You know what? I think Noelia is a driver. Now that I think about our meetings, yeah, I think you are with content creation. Remember? Yeah, I remember. Like sometimes we'll be in the meeting, and then she's like, "Okay, this is what we're doing." Yeah, yeah. And it's crazy. Like the way we set up, we're set up. Chris and Noelia do content creation, and Pablo and I do client acquisitions. And so it's kind of like you have both opposites of the business chemistry working together, which is really cool.
Isn't that so interesting? Like you could have someone do that business chemistry questionnaire. It's kind of like a Myers-Briggs test, but it's very simplified. Deloitte created it. It's free on the internet. They let anyone use it for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting because based on someone's profile, you could say, I think you might be better in sales versus in the marketing department or order management or help desk or what have you. You know, you don't want to stereotype and think that you got to ask people where they feel like they could be, but it's usually, you know, especially if they're saying, yeah, you know, I'm pretty young. I don't have a lot of experience with anything. Well, if you don't have a lot of experience, the question is, what do you like to do? And what you like to do might be provided once you fill out that business chemistry questionnaire, because it's kind of asking you, how are you? What are you? Like, what's your personality and how are you wired, you know?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I encountered that a couple times. I've encountered that a couple times at Dartmouth, where you know, like I have some friends who really like you know, they really love school. They're into academics. However, they haven't they have like a limited amount of like work experience, and so then they're like at a point like, oh, I don't know what I like to do, and so maybe I can send them the business chemistry to help them out.
You could create a consulting business on that. I mean, in consulting firms, like where I used to work at Deloitte or where I am now at Bain, there's human resource consulting. By the way, Noella, you might be interested in this because a lot of human resource consultants, which is a huge practice area of management consulting firms, Deloitte had one of the top ranked one in the world. That's where that business chemistry work came from. Noella, it's basically a lot of people with psychology degrees in there, because what it is it's going and helping the human resource department. Every company has an HR department. The HR department is meant for the resources of the employees. Everything from, do you have the right benefits? Are you making the right amount of money? Is it fair? Are we making sure we're not discriminating? Are you following the rules of the organization? But also, how do we make you feel more involved? How do we make you feel more engaged? How do we keep you learning? How do we keep you improving? How do we train you? That's all HR functions, human resource functions, and that's in businesses. But I know a lot of psychologists, people that graduated with psychology degrees, that become exceptional at running a human resource department for a company, for profit or nonprofit. What's that?
Weeks back, I actually mentioned that to Marco, that if we ever got big enough, that I wanted to like control the HR. Like,
yes.
Yeah, I think she'd do an amazing job at it too.
Yes, and that's a fun job. It's really a people job. It's what you do. You know, the HR department would take care of like everyone working from home and using Zoom. They would work with the IT department, the technology department, to make sure everyone was up and running and taken care of, and then make sure that model was working. You know, and so listen, with the last 5 minutes, I want to finish because tomorrow I want to talk to Kevin about his business that he ran. So on the marketing one, so Fifth Street.
Fifth Sun Pictures.
Fifth Sun Pictures. Why did I think it's Fifth Street? I don't know. Fifth Sun Pictures. So what's the actual service you're offering? Because you mentioned consulting. A lot of people don't understand what a consultant does. Describe what you mean by consulting, Marco, as far as making a business out of it.
Yeah, and so I think in regard to what Pablo mentioned is So for us, since we're doing marketing, a lot of our clients, they kind of reach a point where they do the same thing on an annual basis or monthly basis.
Marco, describe, some people might not even know what marketing is. So describe that first, then talk about that.
Okay. And so marketing is like the process of at least for us, it's process of getting like brainstorming a number of like ideas and strategies that you could potentially implement in an organization or a company, and especially in regards to like creating creative content. And so the idea is like to really promote an organization or company's goals, visions, events, and so you can decide on kind of what goals you want to set, and you can. And the idea of marketing is really to complement those goals with like creative content, or even making sure that those goals are like they find themselves in like on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, where they
So
can reach.
give an example of one of your customers and what marketing they needed. Also, I throw in there one key word in marketing, which is, that's what my degree is in, by the way, industrial, it's in marketing, but brand, building brand equity, building brand awareness. But Marco, describe, put it in plain language for someone, like what was one of your clients or your customers, what was their need, and how would you present them? Act like I'm one of your clients. What would be a typical client of yours?
Yeah, so like one of our recent clients, his name was Jorge Nuno. He was running for LA County Supervisor, District 2. And he wanted to know how could so his goal was to get a certain amount of votes in the March 3rd primary election. And so, he came to us and he said, I want, for my campaign, I want to get you civically involved. And so that's really what he approaches with. And so he needed help recruiting students. And so for marketing, we recommended sort of setting up a system, really what I would call a funnel. So that, starting from like which could be like sending an email, and then, making sure that email reaches a student who would be interested in actually volunteering for the client. And so that's really what we did for the client. And then at some point, we received a certain amount of applicants or volunteers who wanted to work for the campaign. And from there, we helped coordinate the volunteer program.
So basically, he's like, I need to market the fact that I'm running for some type of public office.
Mm-hmm.
I need to get the word out there. I want to attract young people. You guys know how to do social media marketing. Can you help? I will pay you if you can come in and provide me that service to help and run my marketing campaign to get the word out there that I'm running and I need volunteers.
Yeah, and his idea was to, he really wanted to get the millennial vote out, which is, historically low in Los Angeles. And so part of the strategy was we purchased data from the LA County Clerk's office. It's like 10 cents a sheet, and you get access to like, previous voter information, like voter history, cell phone address, email. And what's cool about this is like now we can do targeted ads, like, so we knew what millennials vote by mail, who are the ones that vote in person, and we use that to kind of structure our campaigning. So at some point, we prioritize the people who were voting by mail, because we know that they're thinking ahead, and then we moved on to those who are like voting on the day of the election or very close to it.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's awesome. So you basically created a targeted marketing campaign, and you found data to help you figure out who the target market was and how to appeal to them.
Mm-hmm.
And you customized the campaign based on vote by mail versus those that vote in person.
Yeah, and that was a lot of fun because it was our first time like working with like new software like MailChimp, and managing like a huge database of voters, and it was pretty cool.
How did you learn how to price stuff when you were thinking like what's a fair price for your service? How did you come up with that?
I think we kind of looked into, so we were very transparent, like, okay, we're gonna like give us your needs, and then we're gonna we can do some research to you know, to discover like what can we kind of quote you for this. And so we always sort of did that, and at some point we created this like giant proposal that outlined the services and, you know, the cost associated, and then you know, it worked out.
Cool. That's awesome. Just looking at the clock here. So thanks, Marco, for covering that. Thanks, Noella and Christian and Pablo. I think at some point when we get into how to create an actual business and then how to run business operations and stuff, it'd be good for you guys to share, like, how do you do the day-to-day stuff, you know? And also I can share with you some ideas on how to automate the day-to-day stuff if you haven't already done it. But that was a good kind of icebreaker to the discussion of, you know, 19 years old, 18 years old, and it's already your second business. I mean, for one thing, if you did want to get a job at a company, whether you had a college degree or not, of course it helps tremendously if you have a college degree, but it's also pretty impressive if you walk in and say, I founded 2 companies, and go to the website, you can see these companies, and I had real sales, I had real employees, and, you know, you've already got that built up. All of you do, you know, where you can say that. So, you know, that's more than I had, that's more experience than I had at that age, right? And those are the important things that an employer will want to look for if you didn't want to run your own business and you actually, you know, wanted to work at a company. I've done both. I've had my own business. There's pros and cons to that. And then I've also worked in companies. I've worked in companies where I felt like I was in a company, and I've worked in companies to where I had a lot of autonomy and it actually felt like running my own business. That's actually why I like management consulting, because it's a pretty, you know, it's a pretty entrepreneurial type of model, especially when you get to be an executive or partner in those firms. You're basically creating a business within a business, which is fun. But, you know, each person likes things differently, but the point is you got to start somewhere, and you get some of the stuff on your resume, and that helps you go from one place to another and keep moving up.
Yeah, I recently, well, not recently, but a few months ago, like it was my first time encountering a company that they have like a whole program like for entrepreneurship. And so, you know, I never thought about that, but there was this company that was recruiting on campus, and they basically said, we have this like position, it's a salaried position, and, you know, you'll get all the resources of, you know, of our company, and you have the autonomy to do whatever you like, and it's like your own startup and things like that. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And so I think some companies are like adapting, you know, like to, you know, so that to continue innovation, right? And, you know, Marcus, you probably know more about that, but you know, I found that interesting, like, you know, for some who may want to, you know, the security of like, you know, like of salary, and the resources of like a giant company, entrepreneurship could be for you.
Yeah, big time, big time. I mean, for me, that's what I like the most, because I like having my own business, but I also like, if you can find an environment where you got a lot more resource around you that the company's managing, so you can focus on building the business that you're good at. And that's called, like you said, intrapreneurship. It's instead of entrepreneurship. Intra means you're inside a company, but you're an entrepreneur. And I'll tell you what, most companies are moving to where the best skill set they're looking for is entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. I know, at least right now, when I go talk to executives that run big companies, and the HR department, Noella, in terms of what type of skills they're looking for to hire, because HR is responsible for hiring and profiling the type of people they need, you almost always hear we're looking for entrepreneurs to work at our company. You know, we need that's like the theme right now. That's what's hot, and that will continue to be what's hot, because entrepreneurs is basically saying you're self-resourceful, you know how to train yourself, you know how to educate yourself, you know how to build something. And so every company is looking for that now, because the days of having a company where you just had workers, it's just not the thing anymore. I mean, artificial intelligence and robotics are going to replace, quote unquote, a lot of the workers, and the workforce of the future is going to be people that know how to be entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, right? Mm-hmm. All right, awesome, guys. We went a little bit over. I think we started a little bit late, but we'll start keeping it to the time, because I don't want this to eat up into your dinner hour. Let's, unless there's any questions or anything, we'll do our ceremonial exit. Cool.
Yes.
Alrighty then. Tomorrow, 5 o'clock.
Let's do it. The way the week is going so fast. Too
It
fast
is.
for me. Too fast.
It is. We got your back. We're out of here. Talk to you guys tomorrow.
All right. Have a good one.
See you guys. Bye.